With so much going around these days.
People predicting a World War Round 3, but is it really going to happen or not?
And why? That's what we're going to know today after revealing the facts about what's going on. World War III or the Third World War, often abbreviated as WWIII or WWIII, are names given to a hypothetical third worldwide large-scale military conflict after World War I and World War II. The term has been in use since at least as early as 1941. Some apply it loosely to limited or more minor conflicts such as the Cold War or the War on Terror. In contrast, others assume that such a conflict would surpass prior world wars in both scope and destructive impact, due to the development and use of nuclear weapons near the end of World War II and their subsequent acquisition and deployment by many countries. The potential risk of a nuclear apocalypse causing widespread destruction of Earth's civilization and life is a common theme in speculations about a Third World War. Another primary concern is that biological warfare could cause many casualties. It could happen intentionally or inadvertently, by an accidental release of a biological agent, the unexpected mutation of an agent, or its adaptation to other species after use. Large-scale apocalyptic events like these, caused by advanced technology used for destruction, could render Earth's surface uninhabitable. Before the beginning of World War II in 1939, World War I, 1914 to 1918,
was believed to have been the war to end
all wars. It was popularly believed that never again could there possibly be a global conflict of such magnitude. During the interwar period, World War I was typically referred to simply as the Great War. The outbreak of World War II disproved the hope that humanity might have already outgrown the need for such widespread global wars.
Opening square bracket.
Citation needed. With the advent of the Cold War in 1945 and with the spread of nuclear weapons technology to the Soviet Union, the possibility of a third global conflict became more plausible. During the Cold War years, the possibility of a Third World War was anticipated and planned for by military and civil authorities in many countries. Scenarios ranged from conventional warfare to limited or total nuclear warfare. At the height of the Cold War, the doctrine of mutually assured destruction, MAD, which determined an all-out nuclear confrontation would destroy all of the states involved in the
conflict, had been developed. The absolute potential destruction of the human race may have contributed to the ability of both
American and Soviet leaders to avoid such a scenario. Time magazine was an early adopter, if not originator, of the term World War III. The first usage appears in its 3 November 1941 issue, preceding the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor on 7 December 1941. Under its National Affairs section and entitled World War III, about Nazi refugee Dr. Hermann Rauschning, who had just arrived in the United States. In its 22nd of March 1943 issue under its Foreign News section, Time reused the same title, World War III.
With regard to statements by then U.S.
Vice President Henry A. Wallace, we shall decide sometime in 1943 or 1944. Whether to plant the seeds of World War III. Time continued to entitle with or mention in stories the term World War III for the rest of the decade and onwards. 1944, 1945, 1946. Bacterial warfare. 1947, and 1948. British Prime Minister Winston Churchill was concerned that, with the enormous size of Soviet Red Army forces deployed in Central and Eastern Europe at the end of World War II and the unreliability of the Soviet leader Joseph Stalin,
there was a serious threat to Western Europe.
In April to May 1945, the British Armed Forces developed Operation Unthinkable, thought to be the first scenario of the Third World War. Its primary goal was to impose upon Russia the will of the United States and the British Empire. The plan was rejected by the British Chiefs of Staff Committee as militarily unfeasible.
Operation Dropshot was the 1950s United States contingency plan for a possible nuclear and
conventional war with the Soviet Union in the Western European and Asian theaters. Although the scenario made use of nuclear weapons, they were not expected to play a decisive role. At the time, the U.S. nuclear arsenal was limited in size, based mostly in the United States, and depended on bombers for delivery.
Dropshot included mission profiles that would have used 300 nuclear bombs and 29,000
high-explosive bombs on 200 targets in 100 cities and towns to wipe out 85% of the Soviet Union's industrial potential at a single stroke. Between 75 and 100 of the 300 nuclear weapons were targeted to destroy Soviet combat aircraft on the ground. The scenario was devised prior to the development of intercontinental ballistic missiles. It was also devised before U.S. President John F.
Kennedy and his Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara changed the U.S. nuclear war plan from the city-killing
countervalue strike plan to a counterforce plan,
targeted more at military forces.
Nuclear weapons at this time were not accurate enough to hit a naval base without destroying the
city adjacent to it.
So the aim in using them was to destroy the enemy's industrial capacity in an effort to cripple their war economy. In January 1950, the North Atlantic Council approved NATO's military strategy of containment. NATO military planning took on a renewed urgency following the outbreak of the Korean War in the early 1950s, prompting NATO to establish a force under a centralized command, adequate to deter aggression and to ensure the defense of Western Europe. Allied Command Europe was established under General of the Army Dwight D. Eisenhower, U.S. Army, on 2 April 1951. The Western Union Defense Organization had previously carried out Exercise Verity, a 1949 multilateral exercise involving naval air strikes and submarine attacks. Exercise Mainbrace brought together 200 ships and over 50,000 personnel to practice the defense of Denmark and Norway from Soviet attack in 1952. It was the first major NATO exercise. The exercise was jointly commanded by Supreme Allied Commander Atlantic Admiral Lynn D. McCormick, USN, and Supreme Allied Commander Europe General Matthew B. Ridgway, U.S. Army, during the autumn of 1952. The United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, France, Denmark, Norway, Portugal, Netherlands, and Belgium all participated. Exercises Grand Slam and Longstep were naval exercises held in the Mediterranean Sea during 1952 to practice dislodging an enemy occupying force and amphibious assault. It involved over 170 warships and 700 aircraft under the overall command of Admiral Robert B. Carney, the overall exercise commander. Admiral Carney summarized the accomplishments of Exercise Grand Slam by stating, "We have demonstrated that the senior commanders of all four powers can successfully take charge of a mixed task force and handle it effectively as a working unit. The Soviet Union called the exercises warlike acts by NATO, with particular reference to the participation of Norway and Denmark, and prepared for its own military maneuvers in the Soviet zone.